Audio check. Are we coming in over there? Because I'm not coming in over here. Yeah, 1 minute. Okay.
I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Lebanon Board of Education, June 20th, 2023 meeting. Let's do roll call, please.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Here.
Mrs. Dalton?
Here.
Mrs. Larson?
Here.
All right, if you can join me for the pledge. The flag, please. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
You did.
We did? All right. I need looking for a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting.
So moved. Second?
We do need to modify the agenda this evening.
We're just going to table it when
Okay.
we get there.
When we get there, perfect, thanks.
Ms. Karen?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Communication reports, looking for a motion to open up number 5.
Oh, you do not need a motion.
I don't need a motion, okay. So we have 2 speakers tonight. They are 3 minutes in length. The first one would be Miss Lisa Job. You want to go to the podium, please?
Are you ready for me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Lisa Job. I'm a resident here in Lebanon. My kids no longer go to, they went through the Lebanon School District, and now I'm just here out of concern for the kids that are going through. I am diagnosed as EHS, which is electromagnetic hypersensitive, and I just want to share a little bit about that, what I'm going through, and hope that we can maybe put a pause and evaluate how many, what kind of devices that we are putting these children under. Some of my symptoms, so I'll go back. I've been dealing with this for about 3 years now. So basically, one day I was well, and the next day I was pretty much not well. So my initial symptoms, they began as just a trembling jaw. The progression, I felt like my walking was different. I had pulsating sensations up and down my spine. At night, I would pace for hours at a time. I went to doctors for about 2 years trying to get a diagnosis. I went and tried very hard. The medical community is not very knowledgeable of electromagnetic hypersensitivity, and many doctors didn't want to talk about it, didn't know what to do. Their answer was a lot of medication. Some of the things we've had to do at our home to deal with this is we no longer use Wi-Fi. I no longer can carry a cell phone. I don't sit in front of the smart TV. We've had to take fuses out of our car. But some of the symptoms I deal with now are I can't sleep at night. It's very difficult to sleep. I have twitching in my arms and my legs, bombing sensations in my head, and these are very hard to deal with. And like I said, it is a very difficult situation. No one would like to be like me. And so I'm just here to raise some awareness for the kids. These new technologies seem to be running away without any oversight. I believe that we need to reevaluate how many devices and what we're doing with these kids with the devices. The FCC has not updated guidelines for wireless technology in over 26 years. I think that they have also lost a case. A case went against the FCC, and they were charged with explaining to the American people why those guidelines have not been updated. So I would like you to, I do have some information I'd like to pass out to you to give to you tonight, so that maybe you can look through. So these kids, they're specifically more susceptible because they have very wet brains and very thin skulls. They are more apt to take that radiation in and suffer the symptoms. So today, I'd like to pass that out. I brought with me Dr. Guillermo Cal. He is an EMF expert and a naturopath, and he's going to demonstrate, a little bit and explain more about hypersensitivity
All right.
tonight.
Thank you.
So-
Thank you, Ms. Job. Thank you, ma'am.
Take it.
Thank you.
All right. Next will be Guillermo Call, and we have you for 5 minutes, is that correct? Is that 5 minutes? And I'll give you a little signal when you hit 5.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Following up on what Lisa was mentioning, let me first introduce myself. I'm Guillermo Cal. I am an electrical engineer. I have worked for big companies in IT departments, in information technology and telecommunications. I am an EMF radiation expert. I am the founder of a company that is called EMF Solutions Ohio, and I do radiation measurements and radiation recovery. I am also a naturopath and a holistic health practitioner. I work with people that have been affected by EMF radiation and other things that are chronic issues. I want to start today by asking a rhetorical question. If we were feeling a little cold and we had a microwave oven that is big enough for us to fit in, would we go into the microwave oven and turn it on? I think intuitively we will think that that may not be a good idea, because we may cook ourselves if we do that. It is important to know that the microwave radiation that is in the microwave oven that cooks your food is exactly 2.4 gigahertz. That's the frequency of the radiation that is in there. And that same frequency, it is exactly the same frequency that are radiating from your cell phones, from all wireless devices, from the Wi-Fi, from cell towers. There is a cell tower that you can see from this building outside there. microwave radiation, the same one that is in the microwave oven, is being radiated by those devices, and many more. Those can be measured. There are devices that measure those type of radiations. I have one here, and it beeps when it is too high. That is a little farther from me here, but if I get closer to it, it starts growing, and well, eventually it will beep, because there is a significant amount of radiation coming out of that device. Oh, there it is, you may have heard it. There's another one over there, there's another one over there, there's another one over there. There are many devices here just in this office. Well, all of those, they radiate electromagnetic fields, microwaves. Now, you may say, well, are they dangerous? Well, we heard Lisa, for instance. Apparently, they are dangerous for some people. Actually, the World Health Organization consider EMFs, this type of radiation, as possibly carcinogenic. So this is the same classification that DDT or lead have. That's the World Health Organization. In 2012, there were 29 experts from 10 countries that created the Bioinitiative 2012 report, and they concluded that at very low levels, from phones, from Wi-Fi's, there are biological processes that are affected by these type of radiations. There is a very comprehensive website, emfportal.org, where you can find thousands of research papers that show that these type of radiations can affect health. Not everybody is affected, for sure, not everybody is affected, but a good number of people is affected, and we never know who will be affected. In my own experience, in my practice, in my naturopathic practice, I have seen people suffering from headaches, from migraines, from fatigue, sleep disorders, pain, anxiety, depression, concentration difficulties, even cancer, I have seen, affected by these type of radiations. Now you may say, but then if these are so dangerous, why do we still have them? Why are we using them? And the key thing here is that everybody says, as long as we follow FCC guidelines, then everything is okay. Well, there are two things that we all must know. FCC, first of all, is focused on ensuring that the telecommunications work, that things communicate with each other. That's what they are focusing on. They are not focused on health. Actually, FCC doesn't even have personnel that knows about health. That's one thing. The second thing is the guidelines that FCC promotes. They were established in 1996. Who here in 1996 had a cell phone? Who had Wi-Fi at home? Who had seen all these antennas that you may see here outside? Nobody. And that's when the guidelines were created by the FCC. All right, if you want to know more, I'm happy to stay and answer any questions, or I ask you to visit my website, emfsolutionsohio.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item B, presentation of invited guests. First, we have the Lebanon Elks.
I don't think that anybody from the Elks is here this
Okay.
evening.
And then we will move on to the Lebanon Lions Club.
Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Mary Bookman with the Lebanon Lions Club, also a teacher here in the district. And I'm the treasurer, and we have Cheryl Brunn here, who is our president of our club. And we are presenting a check for $500 to replenish the funds that we give to Lebanon City Schools to help boys and girls that are in need, that need glasses and exams. So that's our purpose of being here tonight. I do want to share that there are some other things that we do here in the district, and just a few of them. One of them is preschool eye vision exams. In the fall, we do that throughout Warren County with a group of people. This year, we were so excited because we were able to do 4 $1,000 scholarships for our seniors instead of $500. So, and then also we did a $500 one for a student from the Warren County Career Center. We were able to donate books for all the Title I students at Bowman Primary School. They received those at the Reading Roundup event, so that was a neat little thing that we were able to help with. We sponsored the Leo Club here at the high school, and Cheryl helps with that. She's our advisor for that. And so that's a really positive way to get the kids in the high school involved in the community and doing service and things. So that's another great thing. One of the things that we have them do, and we help with the Lions Club too, is we place recycling bins at each school in the district, and we recycle plastic. And we get Trex benches. I just delivered one at Bowman today. So we've got 2 at the high school, 1 at Donovan, and we're hoping to get some more. So after we do 500 pounds of plastic, which is a lot of plastic. So if you see me going to Walmart, every time I'm always hauling in plastic. They call me the bag lady now. But that's kind of a joint effort with the Leo Club and our Lions Club, something that we do. Our Lions Club puts them around the community. We've got one at the Lebanon Food Pantry, just turned one into the Parks and Recreation. So we kind of go back and forth. The Leo Club sponsors one, and then we sponsor one. They tend to do the ones that are here around the school. We also do lots of other donations. We always donate to the Lebanon High School After Prom, Christmas for Tots, the Lebanon Food Pantry, and just many other things that we do in the area. Recently, we helped a Lebanon school student purchased or helped to get an ability dog that she was in need for. So, and of course, we do dogs for canine for companions. We help with them, pilot dogs and things like that throughout the state. Some people might not be aware, we also help with tornadoes and disaster relief. We helped with the Goshen Lions. We do that with the Lions through Ohio and the International Lions. So just wanted to make you aware of some of the things that we do right here in the community. And of course, when everyone hears Lions, they think glasses. We also have boxes at each of the schools where we collect glasses. We have them around town. There's one at LCMB, at the YMCA, some of the doctor's offices in town. So if you ever, Sibsy Klein office. So if you're ever needing to get rid of some glasses, you have extras. We do recycle those, reuse those, working with one of the vision, I'm trying to think of the group, Vosh is what it's called, and Ask Vosh out of Ohio State, where they take the glasses and get them new prescriptions. So they can be used. Those are used internationally. Unfortunately, we can't use those here in the United States, so that's why we do things like this, so we can help boys and girls that need glasses. So do you have any questions, or? No?
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
One other thing, this summer, Route 42 Car Show. It's on July 15th. If anybody can come out and join us, that's one of our fundraisers. And then, of course, our Lebanon Lions passbooks. This year, we partnered with Bowman Primary, and they helped us sell them, and that was a great thing. That's essentially why we were able to have extra money for the scholarships and things this year. So we appreciate the support of the schools and the community. And I guess that's it.
Mary Cheryl, thank you very much.
Roy,
When
do you
did you
wanna
want to
get
do
a
a picture?
Picture.
With Mr. Severs and?
With you.
No, Mr. Severs.
The standing acting board president.
Come on, Roy, go.
It's fine.
He doesn't want to get into it.
No, it's good.
Jeez.
Okay.
He's going to be there anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, we're blocking.
You're going to be here.
I don't know if I'm like.
You're all dressed up. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I want to thank the Lions Club. You've been so supportive for many, many years, and the students of Lebanon certainly benefit from all the work that you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary Cheryl. Moving on to item C, Superintendent Report, Mr. Severs.
Yeah, so I have several things I want to cover this evening, a couple of things from the list here, and maybe one or two other, just to give you guys an update on how things are going. The first thing, and this may not be in order because I didn't see this earlier. I won't read everything on the slide, but I have some information here I sent this to the board about a week ago before leaving on vacation, but we found that our current board policy with Neola differs from what is currently been the practice for the last 3 years. So during June of 2020, the Board of Education took action to reduce the graduation requirements from 23 down to 20. That was specifically done as a result of the pandemic, concerns about students receiving the necessary number of credits to graduate based off of some of the changes of that. So the first point there is actually a quote from the current policy that says 23 credits. You'll also notice that it says those credits need to be earned in grades 9 through 12. We currently allow credits to be earned in 7th and 8th grade in Algebra 1, Spanish, performing arts, health. And so we need to take a look at this policy. Long story short, but what we're currently doing is we're currently allowing students to graduate with 20 credits. So we went back and looked. We were trying to find, because we updated board policy several months ago to include things like the financial literacy requirements that are new. And Mr. Grayler and Mr. Reynolds, the high school principal, thought, hey, wait a second, you changed graduation requirements to 23. Isaac, what were you doing? This is going to be a problem for us. And I said, I didn't change anything. So we found this problem. You'll notice there in B, during the board meeting, and Esther, you would have been the only one on the board at the time. I'm sure Mr. Lane remembers this because he's apparently the one quoted in the board minutes as if saying this, that Mr. Lane made the recommendation immediately following the first resolution, 5620 and 5621, said he would like to review this annually with the ultimate goal of returning to at least 23 credits once the impact of COVID-19 have been reduced. To my knowledge, this has not been reviewed annually since June of 2020. Didn't know this was a thing until recently. And so we're okay. Our students who've graduated the last several years have met the requirements as outlined by the board. But we need to figure out should that policy stay at 23 or 20. So 20 is the state requirement. You have to have 20 credits to graduate in the state of Ohio, and those range anywhere from 20 to 23, 24, 25 across the state. I have no way of knowing why it was set at 23 here, except that's what it was, and it lists in the policy several things. So I'm bringing this to you to kind of make you aware this needs to be an ongoing discussion, but also have a recommendation. So the recommendations, this is my recommendation. I would like to maintain the requirement for 20 credits for at least current juniors and seniors. They started high school under this impression, at least juniors and seniors, depending upon what we end up doing, maybe phasing that in. Just to give you an understanding, the class of 2024, going into their senior year, the students now transitioning their senior year, we have 7 students of our graduating class that will require some sort of credit recovery this next school year, either summer or school year, to graduate at the 20 credit limit. If we were to change that to 23 credits, that number would increase for the next year's seniors to 51 students needing credit recovery. So significant impact between going from 20 to 23 credits. And just looking at it, I don't believe that going to 23 credits is going to impact our top level, or going back to 23 credits will significantly increase the education of our top level students, right? We have students who are graduating with far more than 20 credits now. But what it does do is it impacts the ability for some at the lower end of that to graduate by going from 20 back to 23. So I think it's something we need to really consider, to look at. I spoke with Mr. Reynolds today, our high school principal. I'd like to put together an administrator from the junior high and the high school, and I'll talk about that in a second on why, some counselors from both buildings, Mr. Grayler, our curriculum director, and a representative of different departments at the high school to review our graduation requirements. So For example, in the state of Ohio, you need to have 4 credits of English language arts to graduate, 3 credits of social studies, 4 credits or 3 or 4 credits of mathematics. So like you look through those different things, but what is it that Lebanon is going to require towards graduation? That's what makes up those 23 credits. And then look at our junior high course offerings, because we do have the ability for kids to get credit at the junior high, to look at our required courses and programs and bell schedules. I think if we put together a group of people to kind of really look at this, we can make some recommendations to the board, whether we think we should stay at 20, go somewhere between 20 and 23, or go back to 23. And that really would have us, we'd have to look at our course offerings, we'd have to look at the impact of College Credit Plus, whether we have kids coming and going, and some of those things. So I guess if there's any questions or comments about it, but I realized that the board in 2020 wanted to review this annually. And I'm bringing this back to you to say, like, I think we need to do a deeper dive on what the requirements are. So is anybody opposed to keeping it at 20 for the current graduating seniors and making a plan going forward?
I think we need to do that for the current grads, or future grads.
I spoke with our board council and with the policy. We, typically board language requires 2 readings to change. They didn't change the board policy in June 2020. They just made the resolution to change the graduation requirements. I think it was kind of an afterthought. I don't think it was intentional to not do that, but we need to make sure that we rectify the situation and kind of put some things in order for that. So I'll probably bring something back in July for us to act on with the full board.
So
Will that committee have time to meet?
No, but I think just to make sure that that our current policy in Neola matches our practice, so we
Okay.
don't have any issues going forward if anybody were to question the graduation requirements.
Okay.
Just to kind of codify what was done then.
Sure.
And then we'll put the committee together.
So setting it like 23 credits opposed to 20, does that affect the state report card?
Does
or
nothing.
It has no effect?
Has no effect. And speaking with the representative from Neola, who was a former superintendent, I'm like, tell me, what am I missing here, right? Why do we do it at 23 instead of 20? My previous district, we required 21 credits because we required them to take 4 years of social studies instead of the state minimum 3. So that's where the 21st credit came from. There's nothing listed in our board policy that's specific to why those extra 3 credits are required. It doesn't change anything on the report card, significantly. We do offer an 8-period day at the high school. There are a lot of opportunities for those kids to get the credits. Hopefully, that's the other thing. If we look at any sort of changes to our bell schedule, 23 becomes really difficult if you consider going to a 7-period day, as compared to 5 fewer opportunities or whatever that may be. So I just wanted to bring it up to make you aware. This was found to be an issue. So I will bring something back in July. If there's any questions about it, feel free to contact me and we can work on that. So the next, I thought this would be interesting, so bear with me on the color coding here for a second. There is a method to my madness. I wanted to give you guys an update just on where we were in terms of enrollment figures. So if you go to the bottom right-hand corner, fiscal year 19, that's the 2018-2019 school year, that's included because that was sort of the high water mark for enrollment at Lebanon City Schools prior to the pandemic, and also sort of a boom of classes all over 400 there, based off of a kind of, I think you think about Y2K and the baby boom that happened at the turn of the century and all of those things that kind of graduate during that period of time, apparently, I don't know. So that's sort of the high watermark. Fiscal year 22 was last school year. Fiscal year 23 is the one we just finished. The color coding is meant to be, if you look at the first grade in fiscal year 19, 409 students. By the time we get to fiscal year 22, they're 415. So the yellows kind of jump. And I did that as a cohort group to kind of see, are we retaining students? Are we losing students over time? So we are down slightly this year, 8 students fewer than we were the previous school year, down 200 and looks like 40 students from the high mark of 2018 through 2019. There are some interesting things that sort of happened. If you look in there, we lost 30 students between 8th grade and 9th grade last year to this year. I mean, there are some changes that happen like that from time to time. Typically, that 8th grade going into 9th grade years where students either choose to go to a private school or some sort of change like that, but it hasn't always been the case. Sometimes that number goes up. So the color coding is sort of meant to follow a cohort group. So the magenta look there, 441 in 4th grade, 440 in 7th grade, 453 in 8th grade. I think you'll, kind of see some of those things have stayed fairly consistent over time and some grades have declined. So why did I bring this up? We're constantly looking at student enrollments as we think about property development in our communities. We think about student enrollment in terms of capacity in our buildings. Also, when we go back to the last discussion about credits and courses, we need to make sure that our staff consistently matches the numbers of students that we have in our buildings. And so if we see a decline in student enrollment, our high school, for example, there's 100 fewer students at the high school now than there was in 2018, 2019 school year. But those are things that we want to make sure we monitor and consider as we look at replacing staff members, as we look at things that we do going across time. It's hard for me to kind of fathom sometimes because I see how many kids are out here enrolling in school every day, but we also have kids that leave. And so we only see one side of that at central office sometimes in terms of we only see the enrollments, we don't see the unenrollments. And also, I don't think we've seen the effect of some of the housing developments that are going to be starting soon. And so we will continue to monitor this. My goal is to at least annually, but semi-annually sort of bring back and look at here's where December is compared to last December or the last couple of years and show you. So we're not caught playing catch up on enrollment figures.
What's our predicted enrollment for this coming year?
We have more kindergarten students enrolled as of now than we did last year. I think as long as other things continue in transition, we haven't flipped the switch over yet to see where we're at. So, it's interesting when you look at it this way. There is a downward trend that's happened over the last, 4 years, slightly. So
These numbers do still include the students that are going to the Career Center, correct?
They do include students going to the Career Center. These are actual students enrolled. That is different than our ADM number, which is kind of the, factor what's the average daily membership? What's the average daily number of kids that are enrolled at one time and attending school? So College Credit Plus, hasn't come out of these numbers. Career Center hasn't come out of these numbers.
Okay.
So that's information I can share and pass on if anybody's really curious about student enrollment, but I wanted to give that annually at least to kind of show you where we're at. I talked to Kim Cope and realized that probably her legislative update tonight would have included the state budget is happening, and that process is happening right now. This is text heavy, so I'll just kind of try to recap a little bit here, but the state budget, the governor releases his budget, it goes to the House, they release their budget, it goes over to the Senate. The Senate has now returned the budget back to the House with significant changes from the House budget. We're hearing it's possible that the conference committee will not come to an agreement prior to the July 1st implementation, and they'll have to have some sort of substitute budget in place to operate as of July 1. There appears to be a difference of philosophical difference between the House and the Senate. The House is looking to include a lot of what the Senate, I think, would include cultural issues into the budget. The Senate is kind of changing a lot of the funding And there are senators who aren't willing to pass a budget that has cultural issues worked into it. This is a budget. We're going to stick to the budget. But ironically, the Senate also included things that weren't, necessarily budget related in there as well when they sent it back. So I think there's pretty significant difference between the two chambers, and we're hearing that it may not be done on time. What does it look like? And I sent, before I walked into the room this evening, I sent all of you an email with several updates. They're long. I'm not going to go over them here. That are sort of the version, a recap of the House and the Senate budget, so you kind of get an idea of what's in them. They have a lot of education-related items. Our professional organizations, OSBA, OASBO, which is the school business officials, and BASA, which is a school administrators association, they all went together and sort of here are some talking points. So if you want to speak with your legislators prior to them voting on issues, what is it around the expansion of Ed Choice vouchers in both the House and the Senate? Their budgets both include voucher expansion at different levels, and both of those are at different levels compared to what the governor had in his budget. So I think it's important for us to be aware of what that looks like and understand. I've met, I want you to know, I meet every other week with Adam Matthews here in town. We have a great discussion about kind of what's going on. So keep my foot on my finger on the pulse a little bit there, what's happening in the House. And I'm really advocating with Mr. Matthews that as we look at the expansion of Ed Choice vouchers, if that's something that's going to be happening, then we need to fund the public school students at that same amount. So if private school students are going to get anywhere from $7,000 to $9,000, the Senate increased that up significantly. If they're going to get between $7,000 and $9,000 of funding to go with them to a private school, then every public school student in Ohio should be getting that same amount of money. And right now, we are receiving far less from state than $7,000 per pupil. And so if that's what we're going to be looking at doing, then that's, I think, the type of advocacy that we need to make sure that this is something that's consistent between that discussion. They are looking at creating a Department of Education and Workforce. They call it the DEW, D-E-W, Department of Education and Workforce. It's a cabinet level position that will report directly to the governor's office. This will fundamentally change the function and the role of ODE in the State Board of Education. There are several constitutional things with the State Board of Education and the Ohio Department of Education, the state superintendent, that they can't touch. But basically, everything else that's not covered in the Constitution is going to be moving to the DEW, the Director of Education and Workforce. So they're really working to get that done. That was Senate Bill 1. That was the Senate's primary focus in this session. And so I think they included that in their budget bill. Maybe not a bad thing in some ways, but we've got to make sure that we still have it done politically in the right way, and that it functions to serve the schools and the students of Ohio. And then the last thing here is that significant, and we continue to advocate for this, but fair school funding formula. It was the Cup-Patterson funding formula. It was really a bipartisan issue to fix state funding and get it at an accurate level. Both of them have included the base cost to be at the fiscal year 22 levels, which is good because they were previously at like 17 or 19 or something. Obviously, the cost of educating kids has gone up in the last 5 years. So they're doing some things there. They're continuing with the phase-in over time. The Senate bill cut significant amount of money out of the House budget that would have gone towards the fair school funding formula and public schools. Read your email. There are multiple items in that email that are sort of legislative updates and talking points and budget discussions. If you have any questions for me about that, I'd be happy to discuss what I know. I think it's important for us to stay informed about what's happening with the budget. Any questions or comments on the state budget? That's really my legislative update for Kim Cope this evening. I told her I would cover that. This next one is something that, just to make you aware, as we talk about naming rights discussion. So we have two policies that speak to this. We're going to need to do some work Policy 7250, that is the entire policy. That paragraph right there is the entire policy of 7250. The Board of Education may wish to commemorate a school or district facility by means of a plaque or naming the facility after a person. Such commemoration should be reserved only for those individuals who have made a significant contribution to the enhancement of education generally, or the district in particular, or to the well-being of the district, community, state, or nation. So we have buildings, Donovan, Bowman, Berry, Dunleavy, Holbrook, Louisa Wright, that were named after people who made significant contributions to education of the district at some point in time, or the area. I want to point out today, it may not look like much, but on the back wall back here, there is a photo of Louisa Wright and her family. There's a QR code down there at the bottom. That QR code would take you to our website. That is a historical biography written by John Zimkus about Louisa Wright and her impact on the community and Lebanon City Schools. And we've since renamed this room the Louisa Wright Board of Education room. She was our first and only female superintendent. Had our first graduates from Lebanon City Schools were under her direction in that time. And so I think that would be an example of somebody who made a significant contribution to the enhancement of education. That's not really changing. What we've seen is a lot more language around the commemoration of school facilities. Why are we bringing this up? As we look at the legacy project and we look at people and trying to reserve and go out and seek private funding for something, putting names on facilities is going to be a part of that if they're going to give significant amount of money towards a project. And so I want to make sure that our policy is in line with that. I want to make sure that we have a way of doing so that we're not talking about a school building or a facility that's going to be here, right? I can't imagine us changing Bowman's name from Bowman Primary to something else at this point in time,
Right.
unless we significantly altered the building in some way or whatever. But when you're talking about a stadium or a facility or a press box or a field or a bleachers or whatever, those are more would fall under corporate sponsorships or some sort of commercial activity. We actually have very obscure policy 9700.01. It lists on there that we actually have a plan. If you want a banner at the football field, the baseball field, or softball complexes, you give $5,000 over a 3-year period, and you get a 3x8 foot sign. And we will announce your name twice per event. That's a start, but it's going to take a lot of $5,000 donations to get to the naming rights discussion we're talking about here. So just making you aware, and I think really asking the board, what level of involvement do you want? Like with Atrium Field, for example, it was an agreement, it was a contract between Lebanon City Schools and Premier Health Partners. It's a sponsorship agreement, and it has an expiration date. At the end of the 10-year period, at the end of the 20-year period, whatever that expiration date is, Atrium Field would come down off the building if they weren't going to re-up that sponsorship. That's what we're looking at more so with the legacy project, as opposed to commemorating a field or a stadium after somebody. Also want to make sure I say publicly, we're not going to be changing the facility from Jim Vandegrift Stadium. Obviously, he made a significant impact in our community. He would fall under the commemoration of a school facility, something that's already happened. So what, I guess, level, we need to come up with some administrative guidelines. We're working on some of those. Up to this point in time, when we've talked about the stadium and the project, Roy and Mike have been on the committee looking at that. Would you like that to be an administrative guideline, something that is flexible and fluid? Does the board expect maybe for that to be more of a policy type of discussion and something that's acted on those levels? What, do you have any thoughts on?
There has to be some flexibility.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you were thinking of terms like a tier?
Yes.
According to.
So more, putting things in more of tiers, so a first down club, a touchdown club type, where different levels. But ultimately, when we sit down with a packet of information and go to a business and say, we'd like for you to be involved, we need to make sure that we have something that says, here's our commitment also on the other side of that to recognize the gift.
Would that be brought to us first?
The recommendation from attorneys and from the Neola is that it maintains as an administrative guideline, that we don't change that paragraph at the top. That gives flexibility, but also we probably need to address 9700.01 from not being a $5,000 banner, over a 3-year period. So I would definitely be something that I would want to seek board discussion or approval of, if that's what the board would like for us to do as well. So,
So addressing the policy that the 9700.01, but still has some flexibility for the administrative guidelines.
correct.
That
I
makes
think,
sense to me.
I think we want to make 9700.01 more broad instead of this level, and then have it in administrative guidelines is my plan. But I would obviously bring that to the board for discussion and share that with you.
Will the 9701 expire in a certain,
So the 9701, like that right there is a 3-year agreement, right, for $5,000 or whatever. Policy 9701, that is like a small portion of the policy. I did not copy the other stuff, which has to do with what the agreement, what the advertising must look like and what it can't involve in drugs and alcohol and things that are not educationally appropriate or whatever. There's a whole big policy. That's like the one thing about levels that
So is it-
exist anywhere.
is it required to have a policy versus just guidelines for sponsorships?
There is no requirement to have policy on it. We have looked and done some research, the 7250, the commemoration of school facilities. There are some that have very, very involved policies. Lakota, Marymount, some other places in the area that we've looked at and found, most of them have this and kind of leave it open more to the administrative guidelines and flexibility for the district then to make some decisions around. So what I would envision for this is actually for this legacy project campaign, bringing together materials specific to this campaign and saying, this is what we'd like to do for this campaign. And then if there's something different in the future for something else, that we look at that then individually, as instead of putting it in a policy.
But really, in order for that to happen, we need to make that second policy broader.
We need to change that language in the second policy. So that's my intention to do,
Okay.
is bring that to you as well.
Okay.
So.
I'm glad you're thinking in the future for this.
Yeah, and I'm trying to make sure we don't get ourselves
Yeah.
stuck into something, but also be specific enough someplace, right? That we have some ability to do that,
Okay.
so.
Okay.
Okay? And then I think that's it for right now. I did want to give the board, I'm going to share it with you in an email. I forgot to do it before the meeting. I have a lot of information around the over-the-counter medication. It was a policy discussion we had last month. I was on vacation last week, and today I got the guidelines from our student services directors around that. It is my intention at this point in time to recommend, and with our special services, that we consider that policy change to be implemented only for overnight field trips and at 9 through 12. And sort of pilot the use of that expansion at those levels and see how it goes. And then once we kind of, is it being abused? Is it working? How is it happening? Then we can continue to have that discussion. But we have very specific guidelines that we've worked on. The nurses will be calling parents ahead of time, asking them for the permission, even though we have it on the form, having some of those discussions, so they're not the sole person making that decision. I have a lot of information to share with you, so I'm going to send it to you to review ahead of time, and the policy I'd bring back next month for
Okay.
Second reading. I wasn't going to ask you to put you on a spot this evening without giving you that information ahead of time, and because I was on vacation, I didn't get it to you last week. So that's it for me.
Excellent. Moving on to item D, board committee reports. Ms. Dalton?
Okay. I don't have a lot to report this month since school is not in session, but I did want to make a preliminary announcement that Kristen Edgars from the Lebanon City Council has been in communication with us and Mr. Sievers about trying to put together some seminars on advising students and parents on mental health and wellness topics, behavioral topics going into the next school year. She has some good ideas that she's trying to work with us and with the city to utilize some resources to offer these seminars.
Yeah, so back towards the end of school year, she reached out, we spoke, and the goal of this would be to try to have some just joint collaboration of what resources are already available and how can we share information with families. And the question that she asked, and I think we've probably failed at this point in time to get it back to her, so I have a follow-up email from last week from her asking for, what are the resources we have? What partnerships do we have with folks, with community agencies or private practices? Honestly, it's a discussion we've had in the last month as a result of our student accident and kind of trying to pull those things together. And so I think it's a great time for us. Our school social worker, Tracy Funk, and Dr. Gibson, our special services director at 7 through 12, both of them very passionate about this mental health work. And so they're going to sit down with me in the next week and kind of map out some resources and how we can respond when we have traumatic events, but then also share that with Mrs. Eggers and hopefully get some partnership there with the city council on this. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to truly collaborate.
CAT committee, we obviously did not have a meeting this past month. Our next scheduled meeting, I believe, is in August. And Ms. Larson, if you can do the Warren County Career Center, please.
Sure. Well, this is one of those times where we don't meet till this coming Thursday. However, one thing that we are working on, our turn is up with the OFCC as far as possible construction. We currently are, at our main campus, our capacity. In fact, we're really past capacity. We've had to turn many students away that wanted to come to a program there just because of lack of space. So that is something that we will be discussing in depth, and we will have more in the future, more information.
We're good. I'll need a motion for item number 6, approval of the minutes from our last regular board meeting, May the 15th, 2023.
So move?
Second?
Ms. Karen?
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item number 7, financial. I'll just run through these. And Karen, if you will stop me when you're ready to jump in.
Can you go ahead and get the motion?
Okay.
First.
I'll need a motion to discuss items number 7,
A through
A through
J?
J.
A through J. So move.
Second?
Item A is our monthly reports.
And I do have a PowerPoint on this one. So just, you see this every time, but this is our current forecast that we built as of May. We are in the month of June, so I'm excited this next month to be able to really take a look at how the actuals came out compared to what we anticipated. But if you remember from the November, this was a slightly better forecast than we had previously. So still looking good in all 5 years, but we do show deficit spending in most of those. So go ahead and move. So we have completed 11 of the 12 months. You can see the gray bar is our fiscal year 23 actual numbers, very close to what we actually saw last year in both our actuals and our estimates for this year. So right on track with what we anticipated. We're looking at, right now, 146 days of operating cash. We think that we'll land the year with about 144, and our target, as usual, is 120. So this dives a little bit deeper into that cash balance, taking a look at our revenues versus our expenses. 11 of 12 months, you'll see, is about 92%. So that's kind of where our bar is for comparing those revenues and expenses. comparing the actual to that estimated number, our revenues, we've received 97%. So most of our revenues we've received so far. That's because our property tax has been collected, and that's the bulk of our revenues for this fund. The expenses, we're looking at 91%. I said this a couple of times ago, but that's a great underage there, right? So we want our revenues to come in slightly over, but we want our expenses to come in slightly under. So looking good there. One of the items that we'll look at here is taking a look at our annual budget for next year. Any questions on where we're at before I jump into this discussion? Okay, so prior to this year, I believe what you've always done is just you get a list of here are the appropriations, and that's what you vote on. I'd love to start giving you a little bit more information, so I'm going to give you a little snapshot of what we'll talk about. We're only having you approve tonight a temporary budget. So a temporary budget just basically says, here's enough money to get us started, but the final numbers aren't out there. So you'll see things like the federal grants aren't there. They didn't give those to us until, they're still giving those to us, but mid-June, those award amounts. So I can't include those in the budget until I have those figures. So hopefully by the time we get to the permanent, we'll have a much better presentation of here's what's actually happening in the budget. But I wanted to give you a snapshot and get your feedback if you want to see different things, other things. My long-term goal here will be to develop the budget document that I talked about when I first got hired, just to build on some transparency. Speaking of transparency, I talked to you, well, it's probably been over a year ago at this point, about ohiocheckbook.com. We are still working on getting our information uploaded to the state. So we switched from our old state software. We were required to switch to the new upgraded state software. Somehow in that switch, the data is not pulling over to the state. There was a lot of back and forth to figure out that the new state software just didn't give them the right information from past years. So I'm very curious to see when we close June of this year if the actual data will pull over, in which case we may only be able to do starting this fiscal year in the checkbook website. Now, if it doesn't work, I'm not entirely certain how that's going to flow. So I just wanted to give you an update. It's been a long time on that, and we don't have it up and running. That's why. The system is not pulling the data over. It's showing less than we've actually spent, which I think I'd rather not show anything if it's going to show less than the actuals. So that's where that's at.
When do you hope to have the final budget? This is a temporary budget.
Temporary usually occurs about 2-3 months before the permanent.
Okay.
Yep. So just taking a look at what we've talked through, went through, endured over the last year, we've had some pretty great accomplishments. So I just wanted to highlight those. We've spent a lot of time, all of the administration, my team especially, spent a lot of time meeting with the various buildings, the various departments. We've engaged a lot of the administration. The business director was in all of those meetings. So it was just a great collaboration. And we're trying to really formalize what that budget process looks like. We're nowhere near what it needs to be, but I'm really excited that we're taking the steps to get people engaged and involved and knowing you can't spend more than you receive. Those discussions we are consistently bringing back to the board on how do we correct these things. We're trying to have those up front. The other things that are coming out of that are anytime that a building or a department is saying, I need an increase or a decrease in my budget, I'm asking them for why, if it's a significant amount, so that when you all ask me, why is this so much different, or why did the forecast change so dramatically, I have answers to those other than, I don't know, that's just how the numbers fell. So we're trying to head off that process a little bit. So that's been a great improvement. It's taken a lot of time in creating that, but I think it'll overall be a very good positive change. One of the other things that we did this year, Scott really spearheaded this, was the 10-year capital improvement plan, which we'll talk about a bit more about later on this month probably. But working with Dan Shaw at Bradley Payne, getting a list for 10 years of all the things that we hope, we anticipate that we'll need. We know that we'll keep modifying that, we'll be bringing that back, but it really gives us a way to be responsible about our finances so that we can say, there's not going to be an emergency this year that we don't think, hopefully, there's not going to be an emergency that we haven't accounted for already. And if there is, there's going to be a direct correlation. If this goes wrong, then some of these other things aren't as top priority because we have to fund the thing that went wrong. So there's really some good information, good data coming out of that. And it's also a really great way to be able to look for grants. So we have all of these safety projects. Now we know how to spend that safety money. We know what those priorities are because we've got it all listed. So a really great tool that I think we can use. We've continued to improve our transparency. We talk about this a lot, but just making sure that we're using codes in the right way, making sure we're using accounts in the right way, funds in the right way. Do you know what's coming out consistently on a year-to-year basis? So when I look at 5 years of data, it makes sense. The trends make sense. If suddenly I have a huge technology cost, I can explain it by, well, COVID happened and everybody had to get technology upgrades, right? So those kind of things is what we're trying to do here. We've also used SCView, though it's been a whirlwind of an implementation season. That process has made things a lot easier. Departments can see all of their information directly on the computer. They can see it pretty close to as it is current. It's not exact because of some of the workflows, but that process has sped things up. They know where things are sitting. They can see cash balances much better than what they did before. So that's great. And then, of course, I mentioned the annual budget document. The other thing that we're actively trying to do, Mr. Butler has killed this, is get our federal grant dollars. He's gotten over $450,000 in safety grant money. So just in the last 2 years, it's just a great thing to be able to say, hey, we're supporting our budgets by grant dollars, using it when we can. And we can't apply for everything. We don't have the manpower to do that, but we are actively seeking out those grant opportunities. So great accomplishment for this year. Looking into next year, just giving you some goals here for what I'd like to see happen. Continue to educate our staff about their budgets. Some of them, as we'd mentioned, hadn't seen the revenue side. They'd only seen their expense side. So continuing those kind of discussions where you can't spend if you haven't received. So how do we get those monies? How do we get the student fee money on a timely manner? So continuing to improve that process. Also, how does student enrollment projections impact that? So do we need to spend as much if our enrollment is down? Do we need to spend more if our enrollment is up? Kind of taking a look at those things. We're also going to continue implementing our softwares. Hopefully most of that is behind us, but as we learn and grow in those tools, hopefully we can still build and improve the processes that we're doing manually to make things go smoother, quicker, and cheaper is our goal. And then obviously continue sharing as much as we can about our district finances. So the board was in support of creating the popular annual financial report, which is just a community version of our required annual financial report. So this is something that you could sit down and read in a sitting, a few pages long, and it will give you a much clearer understanding of how the year ended financially. And then the annual budget document, as I mentioned, and then the Ohio checkbook. So that's some of our goals moving into this coming budget season.
Karen, do you, I don't want to put you on the spot, but off the top of your head, we talked about this, how much money was collected in our outstanding student fees after the notices and things went out?
It was substantial.
Like,
I want to
wasn't it
say.
close to like $250,000 came in?
Yeah, it was substantial.
Simply based off of the notifications?
So,
So,
yeah.
and we had that discussion several months ago. We were sitting at around $390,000. And I think we're now down under $200,000 as
And we're hoping to
outstanding
give you
fees.
some very good information as to when that happened. So we sent out a notice, and here's how much was collected. We did find out that our software is delayed in posting that information. So our initial meeting, we sat down and it was probably half of a month before it actually hit our software. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to track, but what we want to project is, here's the letter, here's how much that generated. Here's the phone call or the text, here's how much that generated. So hopefully we'll bring that back when you guys approve the student fees, but it was awesome to see those numbers come through. It really helped.
So is it going to stay delayed like that as far as notification?
Maybe. We're working with our software company. We haven't received a lot of training. And so when we ask those questions, apparently we're one of the only to ask those questions. I'm not sure how this is working, but we'll figure this out. Sometimes it's been a button on the back end needed clicked. Sometimes it's, no, this is how it works. And so we're continuing to, my assistant treasurer is here in the crowd. He gets to do all of the manual work to track those back and forth. So he's trying to identify the patterns and see what is actually happening versus what should be happening.
So it's still a learning process?
Yes,
Okay.
very much, very much.
I've also told Karen she's not allowed to implement anything new for the next several years.
I was very happy about that.
We're not allowed to do anything different or new. There are improvements, but
Yes.
it is
Until the state
literally
tells you you
driven
have to
her
take-
to sleepless
That's
nights.
the problem.
The impact is on her, not on me, so I'm trying to look out for her by saying nothing new for a while.
Hopefully
So-
no more softwares.
Yeah.
Karen, I have one question. It may be obvious, but the $400,000 plus in safety grant, is that like safety security? Is that what safety means?
Yes, so anywhere from safety films on windows to
Okay.
upgraded security systems.
So it's used specifically for that? Okay.
Yeah.
So when we wrote it, it included fencing around playgrounds. It included access and security, access controls for certain doors that didn't have them. So I think I sent an email out last month that showed sort of entryways. We'll be getting some safety films and things on that, which allow you to see out, but not necessarily see into the cafeteria areas from the outside and things like that. So some of that work is taking place this summer or has already taken place. And other parts of it will be an ongoing process.
Okay.
So
Thanks for the clarification.
So this is just a snapshot. This is very temporary data, but this is eventually what I'd love to be able to provide you annually with the budget. This takes a look at just some of our bigger funds. As you all know, the general fund is our largest fund, and that's the one we talk about every single month. That's the one we are doing the 5-year projection, the forecast. But we also have some other funds that are pretty large. So our bond retirement fund has a property tax levy that helps fund some of the improvements that we've had to our buildings. The capital improvement fund, the same thing. Our food service fund is what's called an enterprise fund. So it is a business fund, is how I think about it. You have to generate the revenues that it costs to provide the food. So that's why it's a bigger fund for us. And I also included our 500s. I'll probably include our 400s, which is why there's an empty line there. But just to show you here's the grants information that's coming through. But what I want to show you is, here's our projected revenue, what we think we'll bring in. Here's what we think we'll spend. And then you'll see a column that says surplus or deficit. So you'll know, do we project this budget to overspend this year? So as we're talking through the 5 years of our general fund, once we get to year 3 and 4, you'll see that as a deficit. That's how much we project. Now, of course, this is a snapshot in time at the beginning of the year when we know absolutely nothing other than here's historically what's happened. So these figures are not final in any way, but it gives you a pretty good sense of what's going to happen in the year. We always hope those get better than they are projected to be. We try to budget reasonably, but hope that we spend under. So that's kind of a snapshot of where I'm going to go, what I'll show you in the permanent appropriation. So rather than just a sheet of here's the fund and here's how much you're approving, I'd like to give it to you in this kind of a detail so you know the health of our funds. And this is just a picture, literally a picture of a spreadsheet that I've created. This is the document that we went through with each of the departments, each of the administrative groups, just to take a look at here's your revenues, here's your expenses, and how does that correlate into a cash balance? So really starting to take a look at line-by-line detail of, here's what we think is gonna happen, and if it's changing, give me an explanation why. Beyond that orange bar, I didn't copy that part, but if it was a significant change, I asked them, just give me an explanation of what's going on. And this way, we can really take a look at, you think of funds as individual checkbooks. This is your checkbook ledger, right? So just taking a look at the individual lines give you a very clear understanding, and we had a lot of discussion about, do you need all of these lines? Do you need more lines than you have? Are we capturing information properly in these lines? So not something I'm going to share with you all, but just so you understand the back end of the numbers that you're getting. We're going through each of our funds, each of our cost centers. So certain funds have multiple funds within them. We're doing that on the back end to give you those numbers. So we're looking at it in very minute detail.
So, and you've talked with like the person in charge of that particular area
Yes.
and gone over all this with?
Yeah, so I created this in
Very
Excel.
time-consuming.
It was a lot of time. It was
There were a lot of meetings.
Yeah.
There were a lot of
20
meetings.
plus, I think it was close to
Wow.
30 meetings that we had with everyone.
Have you completed that?
We have. So I created this in Google Drive and shared it with each of those department heads or building leaders and asked them to complete the things that were yellow. The orange bars were for the treasurer's office to complete, but anything that was in yellow, I said, give me some rationale. What makes sense to you? I don't know at a building level or at a department level, line by line detail. I can only project based on what's happened in the last 4 years. So I asked them to really take a look, and it's been a lot of learning, but I think it's been a positive experience, but it has been a lot of work. Some like it better than others.
I would say this, that our building administrators and department chairs and people that were involved in this process had never gone through this exercise. And they left, it was an eye-opening experience for them. They realized, some of them were willing to say, like, I now realize that, like, how that budget, that's there, and we don't really need $250,000 for bus repairs anymore when we buy new buses, right? So we can budget differently, and that $200,000 could go towards something else. Like, they began to see it in a different way. So I think it was very helpful and beneficial process. So
I think it's always good to analyze your funds and how they're being used. So I like that. Thanks for all
How
your
often
time
will
on that.
they actually do this project? Will it every 3 years or every 4
We
years?
will do
or-
this annually. So the first year was by far the longest meetings because I had to explain everything that was happening. Most of them hadn't seen any revenues. So here are your revenue codes. Here are your expense codes. Here's what some of those, that long string of numbers at the far left, each of those means something. Well, they hadn't heard any of that. So there's so much explanation. Next year, what I hope to do is say, okay, here are your budget sheets. Now bring to me your proposals. So when we have those budget meetings, this is all filled out. They already understand it. They can ask questions, but they'll understand the basics. So those meetings will become significantly shorter because they understand what their budget's doing. And so then I can take this information, and kudos to my husband, who's a programmer. He was able to take this information, write a program to pull it up, 5 minutes, and I had a sheet that I could upload into my financial software for our budget. So fantastic time saver. So I'd love to have the buildings give me this information. I put it into my spreadsheet, run that program, and it's in our software. As opposed to line by line, which I've had to do, line by line, entering those numbers. It's a lot of lines. So, good things happening, I think. And I just had to end with a funny little comic here. We are making progress.
Very good. Moving on to item B, amended appropriations. C is amended certificate of estimate resources. Karen, if you need to jump in, jump in.
Okay.
D is donations, which we greatly appreciate. Norvell Foundation, Witt's Frozen Custard, Mr. and Mrs. Michael Bronson for $25,000, Friends of Academics, Harvard Civic Trust, and 3 anonymous donors. Item E is temporary appropriations for the fiscal year 2024. F is our amended certificate of estimated resources. G, resolution.
So let me jump in real quick
Yeah.
with G. This is a resolution similar to we've seen as we're going through this very detailed budgeting process. We found some funds that have $2, 17 cents, $50. We're just trying to clean up some of those. So some of these grant funds or the one is a scholarship fund that the bulk of the scholarship was left. You're not going to give a kid $7 scholarship, right? So we need to move that to a scholarship fund that can absorb that and give it out appropriately. So that's what that item G is.
So this is just cleaning up some accounting. then.
Yes, yes.
H is activity purpose statement. I, approve payments to families in lieu of transportation. And J is then and now. Karen, anything you want to add to?
So really quickly on I, this is something we do annually. You'll see that this came from our transportation department, the support there in that item. So this is something that we anticipate. The then and nows, I have a list of them, but some of the things that we see regularly and why we're bringing them to you, we canceled an original purchase order and got the invoice after we canceled it. It was very late, it came in, well, now it's a then and now, even though we had already planned for it. One of these is similar to, well, this is for the drum line, where they hadn't collected the student fees, so we couldn't make any payments until those fees were collected. So they couldn't create a purchase order, there was nothing there available.
Has that gotten a lot better?
It's gotten a lot better. The payment plan option for the marching band seems to be working really well. We've had some challenges because Progress Book isn't updated until the new schedules, until the new school year comes out. We've had some challenges in collections. How do we monitor those, make sure that that's going to get back to Progress Book? So we're doing some things. We're hoping that we can make some improvements in pay schools that will allow for those collections, but it's been challenging for our parents because it's either cash or check. There's no credit card availability there. And so we're hoping to make that a little bit easier.
It has been helpful for them to not have to pay a fee, though, when it's cash or check.
That's true.
But we do not update and flip from last school year to next school year until sometime in July, because there are students doing grades and we're trying to finalize all that stuff. So next school year's calendar of stuff won't roll over in student software until later this summer, which means there aren't fees assigned to students until that happens. So that's the conflict there.
It has been great. Parents are really on board with paying those, so that's been fantastic. So that's the then and nows.
All right, so that is it. Ms. Irvin, roll, please.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Number 8 is a public records request, and I believe we had one of those. Moving on to item 9, I'm looking for a motion to open up other business.
So this one, you'll need a motion to table. This is for our levy for renewing our permanent improvement levy. We do not have a 2/3 vote, and by Ohio Revised Code, we are required to have more of you than 3.
So we can just do motion A, B, C, D.
No,
Each
just
individual.
each one.
Okay, so I'll need a motion for item A to table.
Motion
item
to
A.
table. Okay.
Motion to table.
I'll motion to table.
I'll second.
Ms. Irvin?
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. Item B, Progeny Building Solutions Contract. Isaac?
Yeah, so this is a roofing replacement at Lebanon High School. The original contract amount there of $1.45 million that you see. There is a change order of $33,000. We've been working through some process there and trying to get warranty items and working with the contractor that did the original roof installation. Due to that delay, obviously, building material prices have changed, and so there is an increase in the cost of some of that roofing. So we're asking for approval of the contract with Prodigy Building Solutions, and then that would include the change order of $33,000. This would complete the remainder of the high school roof. going from shingles to metal roof. It will be the same color, the same pattern wave, all of those things. It's a different manufacturer, but they are matching it to what was there at a significantly less price than the other contractor. So,
Ms. Irvin?
Motion?
Second.
Did we already have the motion?
No.
Okay.
No, I need that. Thank
Make the
you.
motion?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item C, the approval, the memorandum of understanding between Lebanon City Schools District Board of Education and Lebanon City Schools Employee Association. Mr. Severs?
do you have a motion?
Yeah.
Do I do a motion first?
Yeah.
Motion
Okay.
first.
So I'm looking for a motion to discuss item C.
So move?
Second.
This is an MOU, so we've worked to change the number of days or when those days are allotted for bus drivers and transportation employees. So we would like for them to attend the back-to-school meeting day with the rest of staff and have that as a professional day for them, one of their contract days, as opposed to one that happens, on a non-school day sometime throughout the school year. They were in agreement with that change, and so we're looking to sort of change their work calendar to reflect that.
So it's not additional days, it's just a change of a
It's my
day?
understanding it's not an additional day, it's a change in the days that they come to work.
Okay.
What's listed in the contract lists like specific days. We're going to start it on this day. Yep.
Ms. Irvin, roll, please.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right. Item D, I will need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
There are so many options for motions and seconds this evening. It's very complicated.
This is another MOU.
Yes, we
between
have several
Lebanon City
MOUs.
Schools.
Mr. Dalton has been working very, quite a bit with our associations. This one, Ohio Department of Education changed the resident educator program. So when a teacher gets a license after finishing their coursework, they get what's called a resident educator license. And before, it was like a 4-year process. And so our contract list, we have mentors for year one for those teachers, and they get a specific dollar amount for mentoring a new teacher. Then year 2, then year 3, then year 4. Well, that process has now been shrunk down from Ohio Department of Education, which is very helpful. But we now need to change that if somebody's a mentor in year 2 or year 3 to help get them through that process, what used to be in year 4 is now being pushed up. So it's no more money for us as a district. It's just changing the language to move what was happening in year 4 to year 3 and year 3 to year 2. So it's that way treasurer's department can pay them the appropriate stipend based on the year that they're doing it, as opposed to what's listed in the contract currently. No change in the fiscal responsibility or like what we have to pay for as a district.
Ms. Irvin, please.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item E, I will need a motion.
So moved.
Second, I'm going to approve the memorandum of understanding between Lebanon City Schools and the Board of Education. Mr. Severs?
So every year, our contract states that we will annually review the supplemental contracts of employees. And so there's a process that happens where the teachers' union comes and says, we want to review these supplemental contracts within the district. And sometimes it's asking to add new ones. Sometimes it's asking like, we went from cheerleading advisor to cheerleading coach. Well, the responsibility of a cheerleading coach now is a lot more than what it used to be because they're doing competition cheers and they're doing all these other things. So this is a process that we go through annually. And as a district this year, we were in agreement that we needed to make these changes. Some significant things just to kind of point out what was in there. Show choir singers was switching from a during-the-day school program to an after-school program. Well, that meant that a teacher, it wasn't going to be a part of their contract day. So the majority of that work is now going to happen outside the school day, which then shifted it to needed to be a higher requirement pay. We also found some other things in there that we changed the titles of. We moved some things around. The majority of the changes were within the fine arts department, music department, because of some things that we found as going through that process. I will also say this, that the teachers union and the administration, Mr. Dalton and myself and Mrs. Irvin, are going to embark on a process to update. Mr. Dalton's already doing this with their help, job descriptions, because we found that majority of these supplemental positions don't have job descriptions. So what do they need to do as I'm going to use junior high boys choir director in order to get the stipend for that? How many concerts, how many shows, how many community events, whatever, or the job descriptions we have had not been updated in a long time. So we want to make sure we have those up to date, and then we're going to look at the levels at which those are assigned and preparation for next year's negotiations, going back and saying, we think that we need to move some things on this and see there needs to be some give and take in negotiations on that. So it's going to be a big project, but both sides are committed to doing it because of kind of how long it's been since there's been an overall review.
Good.
Ms. Irvin?
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. Number 10 is other educational, and I believe we can do all these together.
Yes, these are
A
consent. You can do them together.
is adopt a new geography book. B, a new French text. C, approve the 2023 Lebanon High School graduating seniors. And D is to approve an overnight extended student trip for the Lebanon High School Jazz Band to New York City.
So a couple, okay, sorry, go ahead.
So moved.
Second.
A couple of things to point out here. C is a formality. They've already graduated. There's not much we can do about this point in time if you don't approve them. We've already conferred their graduation. But it's something we've always done here, so I think it's good for us to continue to do that and have it on record. D is an overnight field trip. That will be completely paid for by students, either through fundraising or their own donation or contributions. That's not done on district resources. And we have a lot of these opportunities where different music performance groups have the ability to go perform other places and get some instruction while they're there. So, this is significantly almost a year away, but we like to have that ahead of time, so.
Very good. Ms. Irvin?
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item 11, I'll need a motion to discuss personnel.
A through what, L?
H-I.
A through L.
Through.
A through L.
A
So
through L.
moved.
Second.
So A will be a list of resignations. B, employment, pending acceptable BCI, FBI background checks. C is substitute employment. D will be supplementals, pending background check. E would be our board resolution for employment of non-licensed coaches. F would be supplemental volunteer coaches, again, pending acceptable FBI background checks. G is change of status.
So just to point out here on change of status, these are newer employees that when they were hired, we start them all at like BA, bachelor's step 0, because we don't have any of their course guidelines or years of experience. But once we receive years of experience information from previous districts or transcripts, then we go back in and approve their change of status from a bachelor step 0, for example, to a bachelor step 4.
H is volunteers. I would be our tutors. J is approval of stipends.
So those three ladies there work as high school counselors, and we are actually further ahead with our scheduling of students this year than we've been in the past. Mr. Reynolds has done a good job with that, but there were some hangups with some issues and need to go back now and finalize schedules. And so we're looking for a few extra days for those ladies beyond their contract time here for them to get those done, so they leave the summer with all the high school schedules done, and kids have those. though they will be finishing up, basically turning in time sheets for the extra work they do.
K is to approve the leave of absence, and L, the approval of some seasonal workers.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Motion carried.
And item 12, I need a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay.
Good meeting, Mr. McCutcheon.